Hi everybody, slight change in presentation today. It's going to be a bit of a PowerPoint presentation. Hope it's not too dry. I just think it's probably quite useful for you to have the information written up as well as what I'm saying. Although I will try and put a little picture of my gurning mug in the corner so at least you can sort of feel like I'm sort of there. It gives you something to look at, even if it's only in horrified fascination. Okay, so I wanted to talk today about something I've been asked to cover, which is the melodic minor modes and how we might apply them to a tune. To be honest with you, I find it a bit of a shocker that people don't really know how to do this, but I think it is possibly a product of the disorganization of a lot of apparent disorganization, at least of many kind of textbooks. And as I have recently been revisiting Mark Levine's jazz theory book, I'm probably going to talk about that a little bit. So Levine says that basically you only really need to know 4 scales to play jazz. And he gives them as the major, the melodic minor, the diminished, and the whole tone. Now, of those 4, really the diminished and the whole tone are kind of special sauce. So they are special effect scales, but they're not generally the main part of what you might play. You kind of use them to create an effect. So really, what I think we can say is that we can get by with 2 scales, that is the major and the melodic minor. Notice that Mark does not include the harmonic minor. He says it's rare in jazz, which is I don't think true. Certainly if you look at the bop era. But that's not going to trouble us today. We're not going to think about that. So a few notes on the process. So in my last video, I talked about the true minor. In fact, Levine does cover this. It's kind of buried in the text when he starts talking about melodic minor scales, but he does talk about the fact that the tonic minor is actually meant to be a minor major 7th. I actually missed that all those years ago when I first read that book. And that kind of relates to my last video that I put out, the true minor video. And with that concept in mind, we're just going to fold melodic minor into just minor. So that means, aspects of the harmonic minor, melodic minor, Dorian, even natural minor and other things. And I do that so it's like sort of minor key sort of lines and ideas all under one umbrella. In terms of voicings, we would tend to use either the major 6th or the natural 7th, the major 7th or sharp 7th, depending on how you look at it, rather than the usual sort of flattened 7th of the minor 7th chord, for instance. We're going to focus on those sounds, what Levine would probably call melodic minor voicings, and most modern educators would. But we're not going to make a distinction between minor and major 7th chords. We're not going to do it when we substitute them either. Now, this is an interesting point. I'm going to use something that Mick Goodrick refers to as derivative thinking in his book, The Advancing Guitarist, which is a really good book that everybody should have. Basically, he says when it comes to chord scales, there's 2 ways of thinking about them. So the first way is what he calls parallel thinking, where you build up everything from the root. So, for instance, if I've got a C7 sharp 11th chord, I'm going to build up a C Lydian dominant. And if I've got a C minor 7 flat 5, I might build up a C Locrian sharp 2 scale and so on. Now this is, he points out, this is very complicated at first blush because you've got to learn a lot of scales, like right away. You've got loads of stuff to learn. However, actually, the application side of it is very simple. You don't really have to think once those scales are learned. Now, derivative thinking, I think, is both more traditional in jazz, but also ultimately more useful. I mean, Mick Goodrick might disagree with me, and maybe students of his might disagree with me, but I think derivative thinking is clearly the way Barry Harris thinks about it. So he talks about the important minor of the dominant, the tritones minor, and so on. And also, if you look at more contemporary players like Lage Lund or even Ben Monder, they tend to be interested in taking a voicing or an idea and then putting in all the different possible harmonic contexts they can think of. So in both examples, they're taking a single idea and applying it lots of ways. Now, Mick Goodrick points out that the difficult thing about that is obviously you just learn one thing, but then the heavy lifting is done in trying to work out all the ways you can use it. But I find that a more creative way. It's kind of more divergent. I think a lot of players think derivatively. I'm thinking of one example of a parallel thinking guitarist, which would be the wonderful Rainer Bass, who's kind of got a system of scales that is derived for any given chord, and they're just all the permutations, and he has some quite weird ones, like over a major seventh, for instance. But I think a lot of people are derivative thinkers, and the advantage of it is you can take an idea and push it into all different places and get a lot of mileage out of it. And the melodic minor scale, or the true minor scale, or whatever you want to call it, is an example of something like that. Okay, no diminished chords in this lesson. We'll pretend they don't exist. They were out of fashion when this stuff started coming in anyway, really. But I mean, I say coming in, but melodic minor theory has not existed, but melodic minor scales have been in jazz for basically forever. And then last thing, I'm going to make everything minor apart from the major chords. So I'm not going to do it to the major chords just because I kind of like having a simple, safe harbour in there. Certainly, I think players like John Stowell would practice doing melodic minor on absolutely everything. And given the information I'm going to give you in this YouTube video, you should be able to do that if you want. But for the purposes of this video and my examples, I'm not going to do that. It's going to be a slightly more traditional sounding sort of thing. Okay, the thing to know is this cycle. And this is the way we link 5 types of chords together. If you look at the diagram, hopefully you can notice that these are most of the chords, if not basically all of them, that we're likely to come across in a chart in terms of chord color, chord type. When I write minor or just major, there's just a letter without the chord quality, and that means all the extensions as well. So A minor, but it could mean A minor major 7th, A minor major 9th, A minor 6/9. C could be C major 7 sharp 11th, or C major 13th, or whatever. D7 could be D9 sharp 11th, or A flat 7 altered could be obviously A7 flat 9, flat 13, sharp 9, flat 5, whatever else you can think of. So you get the picture, right? These are just basic names for sounds that can be more complex. But just by keeping it down to a very simple collection of chord names, hopefully the diagram's a bit clearer. Joe Pass said you could basically play jazz with only 3 chord colours, basically minor, major and dominant, and hopefully what I'm showing in this video is actually there's only really 2, although it can be helpful to think of 3 because the dominant scale has a different emphasis from the major scale. But all these 5 things are basically unifiable under one heading, right? So to remember this, it's going to be helpful to know the intervals between each thing. So A minor to C is a minor third, C to D7 is a whole step, D7 to F sharp minor 7 flat 5 is a major third, F sharp minor 7 flat 5 to A flat 7 is altered is a whole step. Watch out for that naughty N harmony. A flat 7 altered to A minor is a half step, right? We're back to our full cycle. We've done all our chromatic half steps. So the thing about this is you're going to need to learn this in every key. But this is a finite amount of information, so I think this is easier, personally, than learning like every single mode from the root up, which is the parallel system as described by Mick Goodrick. Okay, so you might find this easier to remember as a bunch of rules of thumb or substitutions. This is kind of the old way of viewing it. So I'll just run through this quickly. A minor, D7, 2/5 relationship. Also what Barry Harris calls the important minor. That should be very familiar to everybody who's been looking at jazz in earnest, as should the A flat 7 altered D9 relationship, which is a tritone substitution. That should be familiar too. C minor, A minor, relative major minor, very useful. Now, what might be less well known is D9, how it relates to C major. It's a flat 7 substitution, which is very popular with Wes Montgomery. But you can see it from the sus chord, which is sometimes written as a major chord with a root a half step up, for instance, C/D. You see that a lot, and that would be basically the same notes as a C9 sus4 chord, right? Going on, that D9 F sharp minor 7 flat 5 relationship is extremely useful. I know it from Barry Harris and David Baker. As the A minor F sharp minor 7 flat 5, which are inversions of A minor 6. This is again very useful. I don't know if people always know this one, but it basically means you never really have to play the last 2 subs. You never actually have to play a minor 7 flat 5 chord, which is a result, as far as I'm concerned, Then we've got A minor / F sharp minor 7th, which is big one. A flat 7 to A minor, which is like the tritones minor altered scale relationship. Tritones minor comes from Barry Harris. And then C to F sharp minor 7 flat 5, which is a really nice substitution if you're not quite sure what to do in the second half of an ABAC song when it goes back to 1. Try that. It's a very common substitution for the tune I Thought About You, for instance, but it could be a nice way to break it up. For some reason, I'm thinking of Ted Green's arrangement of They Can't Take That Away From Me, which uses that substitution as a variation in the second half. It's a very nice substitution, and it's a good like secret trick for making boring progressions sound more interesting. Okay, so finally, I've got the first 16 of Stella by Starlight up here. These changes are taken from the real book. The real book changes are a little bit funny in the way that they're written out, but they tend to kind of keep them quite simple. They haven't put any of the melody notes in the upper extensions. For our purposes, that's fine. We don't really care about any of that. So we've got obviously the first two chords, blah, 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 E minor 7 flat 5, A7 flat 9. These are not the original changes. I don't want to hear anything about that in the comments. For the purposes of this exercise, we're not dealing with diminished chords. If you want to deal with a diminished chord, you could do far worse than to play D flat diminished, whole half, over the first 2 bars of this tune. And that would be probably a better choice, actually, than what I'm going to tell you. But we're going to keep it simple. So what I want you to do is I'd like you to have a look at all these changes and think about the cycle on the previous few pages and think if you can work out any of these yourself. I'll give you a few minutes to think about that. Well, a few seconds anyway. Okay, so hopefully you will have worked out some of these, if not all of them. So the first chord, we're going to use that inversion thing. It's just a G minor, B flat minor, C minor, right? F minor, well, it's F minor 7, B flat 7. So in both those cases, we're kind of amalgamating those 2 5s together into one minor thing. And that works because, of course, we have our 2-5 relationship. So C minor 7, F7, C minor, F minor 7, B flat 7, F minor. And we're going to leave E flat as it is. And then E flat minor instead of A flat 7. Okay? That's the, if you like, Lydian dominant relationship. Again, B flat unchanged. B flat minor. I'm going to ignore here E minor 7 flat 5. It's a short-lived chord, and for the purposes of soloing, especially at faster tempos, you might just want to play one scale a bar. So I'm just going to think about the A7 there, and it's kind of altered because we're in a minor key. So let's do B flat minor there, and then D minor, and then B flat minor again. F, and that's from the 2-5 thing. Okay, F major, obviously. Again, we're going to do that same A7 flat 9 going to B flat minor thing that we did the next line up. And then by inversion, A minor 7 flat 5 becomes C minor, and then half step up to get that altered sound, D7 flat 9 becomes E flat minor, just as A7 becomes B flat minor. Hope that makes some sort of sense, and I haven't just confused everybody by explaining it. Okay, here's the next one. G augmented 7 or G7 sharp 5, that should be written out. It's a non-standard chord symbol. This is what's in the original real book. So I wrote it out like this just so you get to see it. That's essentially a type of altered dominant, really. It's a G7 sharp 5, really, or G7 flat 13. Have a think about this one. Okay, so that G7 goes to a half step up, so it's A flat minor. And the C minor 7 stays as it is. It's just C minor. We're going to get rid of the 7 and just do whatever C minor stuff we feel like. And then A flat 7 relates to E flat minor. It's kind of that 2-5 relationship again, or Lydian dominant if you like. B flat major 7 goes to B flat. E minor 7 goes to G minor as before. A7 goes to B flat minor. And then we're just down in whole steps, right? It's a pattern. So D minor 7 flat 5 goes to... can I say half diminished? Okay. E half diminished, G minor, A7 altered, B flat minor, D half diminished is F minor. G7 altered is A flat minor, and C half diminished is E flat minor, F7 altered is G flat minor, and we leave B flat major the hell alone. Okay, so I hope that makes some sort of sense, and now I'm going to demonstrate me playing these scale choices over the chord progression.